A lot of men with same-sex attraction, that's what they really need is healthy connection from other men, and getting that is extremely difficult.
Almost everyone in this community, but also outside this community, experiences some form of fluidity.
And I would not trade that for any gay relationship that I had in the past.
But did you feel some sense of kind of like you were more happy outside of religion than before?
Being affiliated religion does more to quell suicidal ideation than being outside of it.
A lot of people feel like there's only these two options.
I definitely get that.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sword and Spirit. My name is Daniel Sorensen, and I'm here with my friend, Tember Harward. Tember's a good friend of mine. Tember, how are you doing today?
Pretty good.
Awesome. So today we're actually going to be able to hear from Tember and have him share his story. I loved his story. It was back when I started studying specifically about this topic. The topic specifically is LGBTQ issues or same-sex attraction. So I'm really excited to hear Tember talk today. But just before we jump in, Tember, why don't you just introduce yourself for those that don't know you, some of your work. For example, like some of your work maybe with North Star Beacon or other organizations. But yeah, just tell us a little bit about who you are before we jump into your story.
Yeah, so I am a convert to the church. Same-sex attraction is part of my story. I lived a gay lifestyle before I joined the church and married now to a woman, two awesome little kids. I mean, I've served in a bunch of different ministries to help support members of the church who experience same-sex attraction and want to keep their covenants. And I also volunteer occasionally, like men's ministries to um, just for men generally. So yeah, that's kind of a little overview about myself.
Awesome. And we'll definitely be sure to link some of the information that Timber talks about into our show notes in our description below for this episode, because this is a very challenging topic and a very polarizing topic. Before we jump in, Timber, actually, I just want to ask a quick question. Why would you why would you start an organization, or why would you be a part of a specific organization for people keeping their covenants, when a lot of the people in today's world, they'll say, well, not living your authentic lifestyle, or not living authentically, or living your best self, is actually harmful to you? Because I think oftentimes LGBTQ youth or young adults specifically find this polarization between the two. It's like, oh, I have to be faithful and be depressed, or be sad, or I have to live this lifestyle and get rid of my covenants. But it seems like with you, you're embracing, like, this is a part of your life, or same-sex attract to Latter-day Saints. This is a part of your life, but you can still be faithful. So just talk really quick a little bit about that. Why specifically would you do that when a lot of people feel like there's only these two options?
Well, because I've discovered for myself through hard experience that um, being in same-sex relationships, pursuing same-sex romance and marriage does not lead to happiness. The only true source of joy and like real deep fulfillment is Jesus Christ. And um, that's something I never got in any of my gay relationships. And it's kind of funny because a couple friends and acquaintances who also, like me, lived a gay lifestyle, and they came back to the church and they came to the same conclusion. And it's the members of the church who have never dabbled with that, who have FOMO for a gay lifestyle, who are the ones so adamantly saying that true happiness can only be found in a same-sex relationship. And I vehemently disagree. That's false. And so that's why I strive to help others who were wanting to keep their covenants and stay true to uh, their covenants they've made to keep the law of chastity in the temple there and to stay true to doctrine regarding sexuality and marriage, that marriage should only be between a man and a woman. And yeah, know, that's what brings the most happiness. And I'm not saying that there aren't going to be any more struggles. I still have my struggles at times, you know, like chastity isn't easy, but it's easier when I have Christ in my life. And having children of my own now is the most amazing thing ever when I'm able to emulate like our heavenly parents and become creators with them. That brings me so much more joy than my previous gay romantic partners. So anyway, um, that's a long answer, but that's why I do it.
Yeah, I love that. That's great, and I think that's very respectable and noble to do, especially with how important the gospel of Jesus Christ is. Because ultimately, just before we jump in, is I think oftentimes we talk about these three different things, and it's conviction, conversion, and testimony. You know, and I think a lot of people they have a testimony of the gospel, which is great, but do they have that that relational commitment or relational experience with God? Because ultimately that's what brings about conversion is the conviction of God versus just being like, well, I have a testimony of God, but I feel like I need to do this because I need to live happy. But anyways, without further ado, that was a little bit long, so I apologize to our audience specifically that we're waiting. But let's just have you jump into your story. I'm just going to give you the reins, and you can just kind of start your upbringing in the gospel, and basically we'll just go until I either have questions or until we wrap up your story, and then I'll ask some questions afterwards. So the table or the reins are yours.
I'll try to be succinct because I can be long-winded, but so I'm not a convert in the sense that I never had any exposure to the church. I grew up in a part member family and I grew up predominantly LDS, but never baptized. Yeah, and my dad's LDS, my mom's evangelical Christian. So I grew up in a Christian household and I always resonated more with the word gospel. But right about when I was hitting puberty, I started realizing that I was having attractions towards other guys or I guess boys my age because we were all we hadn't hit puberty yet, but I was starting to feel attracted to other boys and realize like this isn't normal. And when other boys were talking about crushes they were having on girls, I was having the opposite. And so but it's something I really used to beat myself up for. um and I really like loathed myself for experiencing that because the only things I heard about homosexuality were all super negative. So when I was eventually old enough to get baptized, I chose not to because I had a total shift in my mindset regarding Abrahamic religion and was really angry with it. And for all those years that were wasted hating myself for something I couldn't control, my sexuality. And so at 18, I decided to come out and live a gay lifestyle. And so I pursued that for a few years and had relationships, did everything that you could in that lifestyle, to fully embrace it and really dove headfirst into it and lived it to the fullest. Eventually, like I alluded to earlier, is like I found out for myself that that doesn't bring happiness. Being my authentic self, as people would say in the world, meaning embracing my sexuality and being in same-sex relationships, I found out quickly that that isn't true authenticity. And at the end of the day, I was feeling that something immensely significant was missing from my life, and I was miserable. So there, yeah, I had glimpses of like satisfaction and um oh, what's the word I'm thinking of? Just feeling,
Like
yeah,
gratification or something like
yeah,
that.
gratification. I was glimpses of gratification, but it's very linked to just physical pleasures, physical and emotional pleasures, rather than really deep, fulfilling purpose and meaning. And so I started like looking for that in different religions, but of course not Christianity because Christianity is evil. At least that was my mindset. Long story short, My brother joined the church about a year before me and started to proselyte me to the faith, and I wasn't having any of it. He even gave me the Book of Mormon, and I swore I wouldn't read it until one day I was really desperate for something more than just sex and drugs, and I decided to crack open the Book of Mormon and read it. I had an undeniable, intense spiritual witness that I needed to follow Jesus Christ, and I needed to give up the gay lifestyle and commit to following Christ and surrender my life to Him. And that was a really difficult change, but I did it. And now I'm here. So I got baptized, I think like a year after I first read the Book of Mormon, and then served a mission, received my endowment, served a mission, and then I got married. Let's see, a couple years after I got home from my mission.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's go into specifically your conversions part. Specifically like after you were baptized, because you know, I guess like one of the things that I have a question about is you said you were had glimpses of satisfaction, gratification, and a lot of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters will say, "Well, I am so much happier living my authentic self than I was in the church because in the church I just hated myself. I hated who I was. The culture of the church is this purity culture, just like, well, I'm in." You have certain leaders or prophets in the past that have basically said that being gay is an abomination, things like that. So they come from this idea or this assumption, this very emotion, and understandably, this emotional mindset. Did you have like any of that before living, this gay lifestyle? And I know you said you were miserable, but did you feel some sense of kind of like you were more happy outside of religion than before, or you were still like kind of pretty miserable?
At first, I was having a blast and felt so free and liberated. And yeah, I think I've heard people say that before, where they leave the church, or if they don't leave the church, they start, really living on the edge and breaking covenants to, especially like gay members living a gay lifestyle or whatever. And they feel free, they feel liberated, they feel peace, they say. And I'm like, feeling peace, the peace of the spirit, very different than feeling relief. I think what they're saying is I feel because I don't have to abide by these rules anymore. And I mean, it's not just that, but um, relief is not the same as peace. Um, it, it it may feel good to not be restraining yourself anymore, suppressing yourself anymore, and so you feel this intense sense of relief, and you think it's peace, but it's not. And um, and I know I felt that for sure, where I was like, it felt like such a weight came off my shoulders when I first came out, and I was like, I don't have to hide this anymore. I don't have to suppress this anymore. I can just be me, be my true authentic self, and it feels so amazing, and not have to worry about people judging me, and I'm just gonna be me. And so I definitely get that. When I was younger, about like 9 or 10, I remember having a strong spiritual witness of Joseph Smith in the first vision, and I, it, I know I felt the spirit really strongly, and it just, there's that overwhelming feeling of joy and peace that just kind of emulates through your body, and uh, or not emulates it, it fills your body. Um, and so in those years living a homosexual lifestyle, I was searching for something more true than that, because in my mind, if there was something more true than Mormonism, then I would find it in whatever lifestyle, religion, spirituality, was out there that's more true. And so like I tried, transcendentalism, Buddhism, um, paganism, Wicca, um, and really was trying to find something that was the truth. And I was always holding that witness that I'd had when I was younger against all these other spiritual roads I was going down. Um, and never once could I find anything comparable or better than what I had felt before. And so it kept being this nagging reminder to me that there must be some truth in it, even though I continually wanted to deny it. Because I was gonna find something else. I just had to keep looking. And I never could find it. Never. And it wasn't until um again reading the Book of Mormon that I felt that peace. And so that's how I know that the Holy Spirit brings is incomparable to any feeling of relief or peace that people may feel in the world. It's just not the same thing. So that's a long tangential answer, but yeah.
Yeah, no, you're good. Don't no need to apologize. Another question I had in regard to that. So we're kind of backtracking a little bit to living that gay lifestyle. So you're just talking about how you felt, you felt peace when you came back. What was that process like, though? I mean, I'm sure coming back was not easy, or joining the church was not an easy thing to do because and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd assume that if you're coming back with, you have probably have a lot of these concerns like, oh, am I going to be treated this way? Am I going to have to suppress who I am again to fit into this mold? Just describe that process to me. Like, what was that experience like? Getting baptized and just being a member, being a believer and a member again, but also continuing to still deal with same sex attraction because that could not have been easy, right?
It's hard to verbalize, but when I initially decided I was going to surrender my life to Christ and come into the fold, looking back now, I know it was grace, but at the time I didn't really understand what that was. But I had this immense just feeling of just confidence and faith and spiritual power to just really go cold turkey and change everything and go head first into the gospel. And a lot of the questions surrounding it didn't really matter to me. All I know is that I had the truth finally. And it was really easy for a while. But I also later down the road I recognized that there were a lot of issues with SSA that I wasn't really addressing, and they came bubbling up later that I needed to address. One of the hardest things was knowing how to appropriately have meaningful relationships with other men in the church. And that was hard for a while figuring out. And I think a lot of men struggle with this is like really having meaningful brotherly connections with other men in church because let's face it, Elders Quorum has kind of failed men in that regard. Sorry to be negative on that, but and so getting those healthy connections was somewhat of an issue because that a lot of men with same-sex attraction, that's what they really need is healthy connection from other men, and getting that is extremely difficult sometimes because just a lot of other men don't really give healthy connection in the way that we really need it. I did get that on my mission, which made my mission was really easy. I didn't really struggle with SSA really ever. But I think it was, again, going back to that, is I got that healthy connection from a companion, working towards a common goal. We had time to pray together. We ate together. We taught the gospel. We had healthy emotional and physical, uh, non-sexual physical intimacy, as a companionship, and that was really healing and uplifting for me. But then getting back from my mission, It seemed like it just like all that was gone suddenly, and it was tough again. So in that regard, it was somewhat of a struggle, but it really didn't become a big struggle until after my mission and trying to really reconcile a lot of different things. Like really finally, my need for platonic intimacy with other men, trying to grapple with getting off my mission, what do I do with my life. So yeah,
I love that. I think that's very helpful because I feel like oftentimes in the church we have this idea of, oh, if two dudes dance together, or two dudes are spending time together, and one's arms over their shoulder, that that's this sexualized idea of something being gay. And I joke about with some of my friends, some of my roommates, and one of the things that I said, look, I'm a dancer. I love dancing with other dudes. It's a lot of fun, and I'm not gay. And but it's a form of, I think it's a form of just platonic intimacy, and I really believe it creates a feeling of just bonding people together, specifically males together, and it's something we don't necessarily be ashamed of. For some reason, in our sexualized, specifically American culture, it's like, oh, this is bad. When it doesn't need to be that way.
on the dancing together thing, it's funny how taboo that is now. Like I've seen photos of men in the late 1800s, early 1900s doing stag dances. It wasn't as uncommon back then. It was definitely not anything weird. So nothing wrong with that at all. But I mean, not that guys need to do that per se. I'm just saying the lack of truly bonding brotherly intimacy in the church um, is bad generally. However, for like people like me who do struggle with SSA and need more connection from the same sex in a healthy way, godly way, it's really detrimental to us. And so I would say that's probably what I've struggled with the most, um, and which kind of will. Well, this is a whole different topic, and I have to get into it. But it can't. It affects things sexually as well. But um, but that's a whole different tangent. So, um, but yeah.
Well, I just want to quickly read a quick quote that Brigham Young, a quote from Brigham Young, because sometimes I joke that Joseph had two people that loved him the most. The first was Emma. The second place was Brigham Young. Because like the love, kind of what you described, it's very, it was very platonic. It wasn't sexual at all, but it was so it was just so profound. One of the things that Brigham Young said is, I'm just going to pull this up on my phone real quick. He said, let's see. He says, Brigham Young says, I love Joseph and anxiously await the moment in the future when I hopefully will have the privilege of taking his hand in fellowship. And even on his deathbed, Emma Smith, for example, said, I see Joseph. I see Joseph. Brigham Young also on his deathbed, if I recall that correctly, said, I see Joseph. And just because, it's taboo in our culture doesn't mean that it needs to, doesn't mean that it needs to be. I think that's something that's, important. And specifically with your story, let's dive in a little bit into that, because, you were talking about how after your mission, creating that sense of feeling or finding that was a little bit of a struggle. So let's go a little bit into, how did you find that? Like, was there an organization that helped you? Was there people in the church that helped you? Let's go there. Like, what helped Tember? What helped you get to where you are now in in a way where you had great intimacy with the brothers of the church?
Getting out of my comfort zone personally, because for a while I was restricting the amount of friendships I had because I didn't want the temptation. I started really trying actively to make friends and get to know guys and just do activities with them. And I think that's the there is like making sure you make time for guy friends. You need guy time. Men need it just as much. in different ways, you know. Also, I started looking for other resources for men with SSA. I found North Star International. So I found them and I started making some connections there. I did my own support group for a while and found some connections there. But I've also done some other men's retreats and met some like just men generally through those, and that's been healthy. Um, I'll be honest. Sometimes it's incredibly frustrating. Um, I crave uh, deeper platonic that a lot of other men don't necessarily provide or even realize. Thing other men need, like I'm a big physical touch. It's just my love language, and I love giving hugs. I love receiving hugs, and not just like bro hugs. Like I need a good, nice long hug, and that's tough. It's tough getting that from other guys. Through me getting out of my comfort zone and actively trying to make friends and resources, eventually I found a few, a handful of great friends who help provide that for me. It's healing. It's healing being able to receive support and not have people judge you. And most of my friends know about my SSA and they don't different than any other member, which is feels so nice.
Are you still? I know specifically with Beacon, your support group, that's kind of not necessarily fizzled out a little bit, but it just life's just kind of busy right now. But as far as kind of what you do now, let's talk a little bit about that. Are you still involved with North Star, or like for example, like your blog, like that you do? Are you still involved with those type of things?
Not so much North Star. I do
Okay.
occasionally write for my blog, but I mean, shameless plug for my blog. I tackle a lot of controversial topics regarding LGBT issues in the church on there. So, from my perspective, um, and I'm pretty blunt and honest. So, if you want to hear a blunt, honest take on things, especially regarding, like um, reconciling sexuality and sexual actions with being married and stuff, I talk about that on there. And more so, I feel like more so I've been a lot more involved with just men's work generally, and by work, I mean like um, working with men who have all sorts of different struggles, whether it's pornography, marriage issues, childhood trauma, abuse, things like that. Because I've found for myself it's not healthiest to just be associating with other people of the same sex who have same-sex attraction. That's just not the healthiest support system. So I tend to uh, try to get support from just men generally, and that's a lot healthier approach in my opinion, and it's been healthier for me. And so and that's where I found a lot of my good friends is through these general men's retreats. And I'll plug another one here for anyone interested. Is It's by Discover Identity called As I Am, and they do retreats in a few different places in Utah, and definitely it does cost money, but it's worth the money. You meet some amazing men. They're not all LDS, but they're men of faith. So all all trying on different parts of their journeys, just trying to figure out life and be faithful to Christ, and it's really cool. So um, I think that's what I'm involved in more so these days. Um, but I still dabble in helping out people with same-sex attraction and whatnot. So I'll still give my 2 cents like this.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I think that's really what creates brotherhood is. I think oftentimes with men, we oftentimes we decide to put on a big face. My fiance and I were talking a little bit about that actually today, where oftentimes we feel like men like when a breakup happens, or they may be struggling with an issue, or like pornography or something like that. Oftentimes, what we decide men always have to do is just not focus on the problem, and that's not always the good thing. We can't always be the big strong man that's just can tackle anything, and sometimes these spaces really do allow us to form beautiful friendships. I remember that there was some close friends actually were specifically from your support group, Tember, that I remember I checked out to better understand what Latter-day Saints were experiencing. And to me, I absolutely just loved that brotherhood that we created there. And I think that's something that's very special and just amazing to um, just amazing to understand. So I love that, and I think that brings us to a little bit of a full circle moment. A question I did have though, in regard to what we kind of talked about, is I want to talk about a few questions that I had in regard to some accusations people throw out. I know you're decently well informed, so the first one I want to talk about is, and this is a public podcast, so if people want to come up to me, that's okay. My email is literally in our YouTube and Spotify description. But the first one I want to talk about is an accusation that a lot of LGBTQ activists will make. And recently, about a year or so ago, David Archuleta made this accusation. And it's specifically that people that experience SSA that are married are either less happy or have a much higher chance of divorce. And I wanted to get your kind of insight, because you're married to a woman, okay? And the church no longer encourages members to get married in a mixed orientation marriage. But I just want to have you give your thoughts about that real quick. Is there merit to what people like David Archuleta and others have said, that it's damaging to and causes more divorces, or is there a sense of fulfillment? Can you just talk to us a little bit about that?
Marriage is complicated no matter if it's one partner has same-sex attraction or both are heterosexual. The divorce rate is about the same. There's stats you can go look up on this. You can go look up the four options survey done by Ty Mansfield, an active member with same-sex attraction, and Tyler Lefevre, a ex-Mormon gay man in a gay marriage. They're both um, I can't remember if they're both psychologists or psychiatrists. I think they're psychologists. Um, and they did a joint study to see what helps same-sex attracted individuals thrive the most. And essentially, it was uh, neck and neck, the same, almost the same satisfaction um, with both groups. Those who decided to leave the church and act on their attractions and be in gay relationships, and those who decided to stay in quote unquote mixed orientation marriages, which I'm not the biggest fan of that term, but that's what the literature denotes it as. And so take that as you will. I would say this: even though marriage is difficult generally, just melding two families together, learning to work together, put aside differences in culture. Like for me, I'm married to a Mexican American woman, and there's very different cultural dynamics there, even though she's a citizen, and different, just trying to figure out different parenting styles. And children are amazing, but they're also super difficult, And but something I've seen in the gay community personally is there's no monogamy. They may say they're happier in their marriages, but it's usually almost every time it gets to the point where they become open relationships. It's super common. Um, it's extremely rare for a homosexual couple to be completely monogamous. They almost always swing, have open relationships, and or cheat. There's a lot of cheating. It's not, and so you may say, oh, there might be more satisfaction, but it's because they're having more sexual partners and allowing each other to do that. There's definitely a higher divorce rate with lesbian couples. I can tell you that. There was a study that came out of Sweden saying that they have the highest divorce rate out of all married couples. And no, I don't consider them married, but that's what secular government does. But they have the highest divorce rate out of any um, married demographic. So, so I would say overall, I the thing that brings me the most joy is when my kids are centered on Christ, when we're doing things like reading scriptures and praying together, even though sometimes it could be like pulling teeth to get them to come read scriptures. When that happens, I feel the spirit because that's what life is about. And like seeing my kids being born was some of the most joyful moments I've ever had in my life. And I would not trade that for any gay relationship that I had in the past. Not in a million years. It's just not comparable whatsoever. Um, so, are there challenges? Of course. Every marriage has challenges. Every parent is challenged to know how to best parent their children. But overall, the joy that comes from it is so worth it. It's so much more worth any physical or emotional pleasure and satisfaction, gratification that I can get from a gay relationship.
And I think it's also important to correct falsehoods because a lot of times one of the things that we've seen a little bit as we interview different scholars and different people on this podcast that have come back to the faith is there seems to be oftentimes a mental health component, or there may be another issue, underlying issue that causes people to leave. And oftentimes it seems that people have these assumptions. People have these assumptions of who they are or what they need to be doing. And just because you have these assumptions doesn't mean these assumptions are correct. And that's okay to have these assumptions, but what's important is not to keep them, to change them if needed. And that goes both ways. For example, Liza Diamond, I think it was back in 2020 or 2021, she did a study on specifically how people, I believe specifically it was men with SSA, but I think it was just all LGBTQ individuals, specifically, well, lesbian and gay individuals and bisexual individuals. And she talked about how almost everyone in this community, but also outside this community, experiences some form of fluidity throughout, just throughout the life. And I'll be sure to link that below. But I think it's important to, what I'm getting at when I say that is, it's very important that we challenge our assumptions, or at least check our assumptions, because sometimes these assumptions, they aren't well grounded. Because they're not well grounded at times, that may cause certain individuals to leave the church or pursue this lifestyle. I know there was one study, I believe, that John Dehlin over at Mormon Stories podcast, who's a very prominent anti-Mormon, did, and it was that 70% of SSA individuals in the term, mixed orientation marriage, are more likely to end in a divorce. But there's the 4 option study or survey that you did. I know there's some other studies out there
I didn't do
that
it.
totally, yeah. What was it? Jeff Benyon, right?
It was
Or
Ty Mansfield and Tyler LeFever.
okay, cool. But and that study, from my understanding, was more of a broader scope. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing with John Dehlin's study is it was a oh my gosh, I can't remember the term for it. Where it's basically it's a limited pool based off of referrals rather than a blind study of random. Does that, what is that called? I can't remember. But the way that John Dehlin got his sampling was not the best, whereas the way that Tyler the Fever and Ty Mansfield got their study is a lot more rounder sampling. So it's just a lot better data. Um, And mind you, it's not biased data because Tyler the Fever is he's ex-Mormon. He does not believe in our doctrine. He's very pro gay lifestyle. But they paired together to do this study to see what was honestly the best for to help people in this demographic thrive in their lives.
And for those watching, we'll be sure to include both those studies because we do our best to provide the best scholarship or the best research out there. So um, just because John Dehlin's study specifically is outdated, we will be sure to link that as well as this as well as the most recent study that with some of the better data too. So if you're interested, you can check that out. But one of the last questions I had specifically on this topic, because I know we've been going for about an hour, I know you got to head out soon, but one of the questions I had was specifically about suicide in the church or just in general with people that experience SSA or are a part of the LGBTQ community. One of the criticisms against the church and or is that that if you are LGBTQ, you have a higher chance of depression or suicidal ideations or suicidal thoughts. And more specifically, multiple critics have come out and said it is due to the church's policies on LGBTQ individuals, the Fan Proclamation, this policing per se of LGBTQ individuals, and the rhetoric that they need to live their covenants. And David Archuleta talks a little bit about that, where he talks about how he started wondering, should I even be here? If God really cared about me, and this has some assumptions about who God is or about assumptions about God, but specifically just that accusation or that criticism. What are your thoughts about that of LGBTQ individuals having higher rates of suicidal ideations in the church? Do you feel like that's an accurate assessment, or what are your thoughts?
No, it's not accurate. And in fact, I was trying to find it right now while you were talking. It's been shown time and time again that being affiliated religion does more to quell suicidal ideation than being outside of it. There are studies showing that children in irreligious homes, non-religious homes, have higher suicidal ideation than LGBT children in religious homes. It's just a fact. And there was even, I wish I could find it right now, but there was what is, there's a gay researcher, open gay researcher in Utah who commented on this exact claim, who is familiar with the suicide stats, and he said that this is um, just it's an irresponsible parroting because it um, motivates more suicidal ideation that religion feeds into suicidality. And he said there's the stats say the opposite. So um, I, I can give you that link later to put in put in this, but it's just interesting that there are people even on the other side of the spectrum who don't necessarily support the church and its doctrine who are saying that that claim is just wrong. Um, and so we need more Jesus in our lives. We need more of the gospel in our lives. And that's going to do more to help with suicidality than leaving the church and cutting ourselves off from the restored gospel.
I love that. And sorry, just one more question. What can we as members specifically, because I myself haven't really experienced, SSA, and I think a lot of members may be listen. I think a lot of members may be listening and maybe wondering, okay, well, I don't, I don't have this struggle, but I know someone that does. Or I want to be able to be a better minister by helping people keep their covenants, but also not not condoning with this lifestyle in an unloving manner. So I guess my question is, what can we as members do to be better? Because it's ultimately very important that we stay committed to, the mission of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that is led by prophets and apostles of Jesus Christ. But how how can we as members do better in making our LGBTQ brothers and sisters feel welcomed and that there is a place for them in the kingdom?
Be a genuine friend. And by genuine, I don't mean a bro hug and a fist bump at just a church. I mean, get out, take time to really hang out with these people, form genuine friendships, be a support to them when they need to vent, when they need to when they need a real hug, real platonic intimacy, be there for them. Um, that's what they need. They need to know that they belong, that they're that uh, especially for men, that other men aren't going to judge them because they have SSA. And I wish I had that when I was in my adolescent years, my early teen years. I felt so alone. I wish I would have had that. So I think that more than anything, be a genuine friend, okay? Just meeting in your quorum in church for 30 minutes isn't enough. Really trying to support the LGBT community, you can be a friend without condoning sinful behaviors like same-sex sexual pursuits. Just like with Jesus, people always use the example of Jesus and the woman taken in adultery, but they often only point to one part. Yes, he didn't cast a stone at her. However, he did say, "Go and sin no more." Okay, we can still support people and love people and uphold God's commandments. So, and we need to do that. We need to do both.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Tember, for coming on today. And thank you, everyone, for watching another episode of Sword and Spirit. Again, we'll be sure to link everything that Tember talked about, specifically the resources, down below. So if you guys want to check those out more, we'll be sure to link those. But everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Sword and Spirit, and we'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone.